Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to this General Government Committee meeting of August 4th, 2021. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Dennehy. Absent. Councilmember Gonzalez. Absent. Councilmember Jaquez.
Present.
Councilmember Reed. Absent. Councilmember Smisher.
Present.
Councilmember B. Smith.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Smith. Absent.
Thank you for that. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the 2A Street Improvement Fund overview. And this is something that I think that of all the subjects that council gets asked about, this is probably the most common thread, I would say, from my experience. So I look forward to it.
So, yeah, we do these meetings every year to talk about the projects for next year and kind of give a recap of what's happened this year. And Kim Swearingen, our Public Works Director, will be giving that update, and I'll turn the floor over to her.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. I'd like to start with just kind of going over what I had supplied to you in the council packet. As most of you know, maybe not Member Smisher, knows about the referendum 2A that was passed in 2016 that gives us a sales and use tax revenue from various commercial businesses in the city of Canyon City from 2 to 3%, and that's deposited into this fund. This fund is used exclusively for road reconstruction, and from that reconstruction, we have determined basically a priority list. And that priority list was, well, it's not really a priority list. I mean, we do have a priority list, but it was determined that we use the PACER Pavement Surface Evaluation and Rating System to evaluate the roads in Canyon City. From that list of roads that were evaluated, we came up with the priority list. We call these pavement conditions OCIs, or Overall Condition Index. These numbers were assigned to various roads, and at the time when the referendum was passed, we had approximately 60% of our roads were condition level 0, which means that they are not only poor, but they have failed. They are failed roads. They are no longer able to sustain traffic, basically. And I think that's what the purpose was, when referendum A was passed, was that we were going to be reconstructing these roads. So from that data, the 60%, we had generated some maps, and I have some updated maps for you for our condition index now. So I'm going to go ahead and hand those out to you.
Cindy will hand those out for you. I apologize. It is quite small, but you can see that a good number of our roads are still red, and that's the graphic representation of those failed roads. And you can see that most of them are residential streets. This is because when we determined the priority list, council gave direction in that we would look at our arterials and our collectors first. So in the past 3 or 4 years, that's what we have been targeting, is those arterials, or those main roads where we could, where we could make the most impact or affect the most residents in Canyon City. So with that being said, giving you a little bit of an update on where we are with this year's budget. We budgeted $3.8 million. Of that, we have $1.8 million currently encumbered. So those are those few streets that you see that are either in construction, complete, or being awarded. So Orchard Avenue, which is the big topic of discussion most often because that's one of our biggest roads that we're doing, is in construction. That is also one that has a water line in it. And sometimes we have to consider those things. So that's another thing that we considered when we were determining which roads that we were going to target, was whether or not there was other infrastructure. And I believe that early on it was determined that the water department was having trouble keeping up with some of our priority lists. So some of that had to be juggled. But with that being said, Orchard was one of those ones that we targeted for this year has a water line. North 10th Street is in construction. It is nearing completion. 11th Street is complete. Evelyn Drive has been awarded. Thank you, council, for doing that. We are working on the back-end paperwork to get that going. And right now, we are designed for Harding, designed for 8th, and designed for Allison. The reason we have kind of held off a little bit on sending those out to bid is that I have a concern with my staff. We are a little bit understaffed when it comes to construction inspections because we have a lot going on right now and they are kind of spread a little bit thin. So we are kind of pushing those off a little bit until a little bit further in the year. But you can see that we are on target. Our little less than half of our budget is encumbered for the first half of the year. So that's a good target. Also, too, is that we have an issue that you may not be aware of, and you may be aware of, that we are dealing with an asphalt availability issue. And what's going on is that the particular suppliers are being rationed by the Asphalt Association because of the availability of asphalt. So our various suppliers are only able to get a certain amount of asphalt per week based on this rationing. We are told that currently our projects are not going to be a problem, but it is a possibility that we could run into a lack of asphalt to resurface the roads that we're already in construction of. We hope that that's not going to happen, and we hope that we can work with the suppliers. We are currently working with the suppliers to make sure that this is not going to happen to us. Let's see, what else? We can go ahead and move on to 2022 and what we have determined to target based on that OCI that I was telling you about. If you see in your council packet from that first page, we have decided to target Reynolds Avenue. The reason we decided to target Reynolds Avenue was 2 reasons. Number one is that water line that I was telling you about. And the water line, we are looking at to use ARPA funds. So the ARPA funds that we have been mandated to, goes for water or communications or whatever, that we're going to use $1 million of that ARPA funds to rehab the water line. So with that, we are basically going to do a complete reconstruction, the same as we did with Orchard. Also, it is another arterial that was not necessarily targeted in the front end, but it does have some OCI of 0. I have another spreadsheet for you guys, and if Miss Cindy would pass it out to me. This is the former city engineer's priority list from the last from the last 2 years up to 2023, and you can see that we have Reynolds Avenue that I have added, and then it made sense to go to Pear Street from Reynolds to Gradine, and then up Field to Central. This just made contiguous sense when it came to the water line. The water lines are cast iron, and we need rehabilitating in all those roads. Also, it appears that Pear Street from 19th to Gradine, thank you, was also targeted on the original list. So it just made sense if you refer to your map that I provided to you in your council packet. That way we can do the most work or get the best bang for our buck. And what happens, or what is going to happen, or what we think we would like to happen, excuse me, and if we could get council's permission to do this, is that that $3.8 million that we typically budget for our rehab of the streets for the year, what we would do is we would look at the account, because there is money left over from previous years that we would be able to roll over into the budget, and we would be able to take that section of Pear, design it, send it out as what's called bid alternates, and then we'd be able to carve off chunks from Reynolds and move our way west, depending on our budget and depending on how much money we have left over. So that's the intent of having Reynolds, Pear, Field, and then Pear again. And that's what you can see in the numbers, and why the numbers kind of look different from the spreadsheet versus what I have in your council packets. Because that council packet, I just had your budgeted number of $3.8 million, and then I have the 5.7 of total. So if we were to be able to roll over that money that has been accumulated from previous years, then we would be able to use it based on what the construction costs come in Let's see, and when it comes to pavement management, I always need to talk about crack seal, chip seal, and have our streets reevaluated. We originally did all the evaluation in-house. We used the PACER system, and it's a federal highway management system. In the future, we will probably still be using that system, as well as using our great institutional knowledge of our streets department. So I stand for questions.
Questions?
I'll start off. My question is going to be this. I'm looking at some of your stuff that you have scheduled for the next go-around. And I look at some of the streets that we have right now with their deterioration and that, and I just venture to see that some of the stuff, and when I'm going to talk about Reynolds Avenue to RG Boulevard to Pear, and they were looking at from Pear Street, Reynolds Avenue, all the way to Fields. Those roads, grant you, they need some repair. But I don't see that they're in such a bad shape, like, and I'll give you an example. Gradine. Gradine's a mess, okay? And Gradine carries a lot of traffic. I would venture to say Gradine carries probably more traffic than we're going from Pear Street all the way over to Fields and Avenue and all this other stuff. And so that's one of the problems that I have, and that's one of the things that a lot of citizens are complaining to me about, the fact that they look at some of the streets that were done, and they say, well, why wasn't this other one even considered? And I don't even see Gradine considered even on your next go-around in that. And that's the puzzle that I have with regards to how you folks determine the locations of streets that need to be resurfaced, repaired, and everything else. And then, because you have Field Avenue, Pear Street to Central, and then Pear Street to Field Avenue to 19th Street. You know, so there's a lot of focus on Pear Street. And I use all these streets when I'm going places and that. And I don't see that they're in such bad shape that we can ignore some of the other things. And some of the other projects that have been done before you arrived, and that's the other thing that creates problems with the citizens. They'll look at some of these areas where the homes that were built there haven't been there that long, but yet they've all been resurfaced, you know, one way or another, whether it's complete resurfacing or whether it's with the asphalt cover over it all of a sudden. That concerns me, and also concerns some of the residents with regards to complaints that they have. And I don't know whether or not there's any kind of a chance that we revisit and look at 2023 with regards to some of the stuff that we're looking at with regards to repairs and all that other stuff, okay? Like Robbie Lane to Central Avenue, surface change, Elizabeth to Field Avenue, and stuff like that. Those aren't really, I know there's folks that live up there too. Those aren't really high traffic areas and all that. And my biggest concern is going to be this, and it's going to happen down the roadway. And I hope that's what we're looking down the road of the future. Somewhere along the line, we're going to have to, in my opinion, devote quite amount of time, money that's going to be necessary before the 2A money for the road ends to deal with Central Avenue, okay? It just has to be a must down the roadway, and I hope somewhere along the line we look at that. My other question is going to be with this. When we put in new water lines, okay, in your budget that you have, if the 2A money wasn't there, you would still have to repave the roads, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so my concern there is people back again. They're seeing a lot of that stuff happening, and I'm not saying that we don't need to replace water lines, but they're saying, are they using the 2A money to resurface those roads when there should be money in your budget, regardless if the 2A money was there, to resurface those roads where we have to put in new water lines?
Okay, I'll address OCI first, and then I'll talk about the fact that water lines and road resurfacing and enterprise fund are not the same. So, OCI, as you can see from the map that I provided you, you can see that the OCI in a lot of neighborhoods is 0. And that's kind of why I had my GIS tech put this together for you, because the OCI is only part of the equation. Of course, as you mentioned, traffic, the volume of traffic is a huge concern. Also, when we're talking about, the volume of people served. So, and that's why I believe that I understand in the past that council gave direction on doing the arterials first, trying to get the most residents the best benefit as called out. And I'll tell you, from personal experience and anecdotal experience, that Ryan and I have talked about this. I've driven around downtown. I've driven up and down Macon. I've driven up and down Greenwood. And those roads are awful. Don't get me wrong. I get it. But when we're talking about trying to get the best benefit and use for our citizens at this current time, targeting those bigger, more expensive roads is where council gave us our direction. Now, when it comes to water lines, and I'm kind of drawing on my experience from being in an enterprise fund in another city, is that it's very difficult to justify using enterprise funds to resurface an entire road. That is not a benefit to the ratepayer. The ratepayer is paying for the system for the water. They're paying for the water that's coming to them. They're also paying for the system of the plant, trying to make sure that everything is cleaned and good for them. To be able to increase the ratepayer's rates just because we need to resurface a road, that is not, in my opinion, an appropriate use of funds for an enterprise fund.
Now, the enterprise fund does pay street damage restoration fees for cuts and repairs and things like that. So they're, they are paying into, into the STF or SDRF.
And I understand that, but, with regards to that, but the biggest problem, and stop and think about it, that get yourself away from your job, think yourself that you're the person that lives on one of these side streets, and they see water lines going in and everything, and then the place being repaved. Their question, that is the troubling question, is they come and say, are you using 2A money for that? And 2A money, when we started, was basically designed to repair other areas and that, see? So that's one of the difficult things, and that's why I requested this meeting with you there, so that we as council members have something to go to these folks that are asking these questions. I don't know if it's the other council members are having the same situation, but that's why I wanted this, so that I can tell them also why things are happening, and hopefully they'll understand what we're talking about, so that we have, I guess, a feeling that we're not wasting money and we're not using money somewhere else. And that was one of the biggest things with our ex-councilman, Jim Meisner.
Yeah.
He always was concerned that we don't use 2A money where it wasn't supposed to be used. And so that's still my concern. And so that's why I requested with Mr. Stevens that I wanted to have you here so that I can talk to the individual that's in charge of what's going on and all this stuff and answer those questions and that. So I don't know if any of the other council members have other questions to tag along with what I said, but that's my purpose for why I wanted you here and one of the questions that I've asked of you, and I appreciate you being here and responding. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's a very tricky situation, enterprise funds versus general fund money. And the fact that 2A is specifically earmarked for streets makes it even trickier. So we know, as staff members, and hopefully as council, because you review the budget every year, is that the water department budgets money for their water lines. The Public Works Department, under general fund, under 2A, budgets money for those roads. We literally have to keep them separate. There is nothing that we can do. I mean, we can do the project together, because then, that's, makes it cheaper, it makes the scope of services a lot cheaper, and it makes it better for us. But keeping that money straight, finance keeps those monies straight. So when we have those, types of conversations with residents, we have to make sure that they know in the budget there is a line item that calls for the replacement of the water line. In 2A, everything that has to do with the street improvement is what the street improvement.
And I know we try to work with other agencies, because I'm on the sanitation board, and they try to work with the city when they have to replace sewer lines and
Yep.
see if anything, so they can kind of commingle and get things done simultaneously, so they don't fix a road and then have to tear the dang thing up again to put something else in. So I
Exactly.
understand that.
Yep, and in fact, we had a meeting with the Sand District, probably about a month and a half ago, when we were talking about ARPA funds, because of course they were gonna request some money for us, since we're, in the same jurisdiction as they are, and of course they, want to benefit from the water. So we had that discussion, talking about what their priorities are, what our priorities are, what are the streets' priorities, so we can do that. We can work together and make it better for everyone.
Thank you, Frank. Sure.
So just one follow-up question to Councilmember Hawkes's. I wasn't on council, obviously, when the direction was given in terms of arterial and collector roads, but it makes perfect sense. And in looking at the 2023 street projects, I guess I'm a little bit confused, because it doesn't seem like they all are arterial and collectors. So I was wondering if you could just address that a bit.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, for 2023, you're probably correct. Reynolds is one of the last arterial roads that is kind of on that list. And Kim, I don't know if you want to elaborate further on that.
No, that is correct. And I really haven't analyzed 2023 as of yet. It was more of a focus of trying to make sure that we were getting 22 correct and in the budget, since budget cycle is coming up pretty soon. In fact, I was lagging a little bit behind on the OCI, trying to figure things out. That's why they weren't available in your council packets. So I got that information, and then I will start working, because I need to work on just not 2023, but the next 2 to 3 years, because, then that's when 2A ends. So we need to try to make sure that we get as much as we can done before 2A ends, should, we try to go out and request the residents to extend it, but to try to get as much done as possible before 2A ends. And I cannot tell you, looking into the mind of my predecessor, what his thoughts were. All I can do is, tell you what he had on the list before.
Okay, so I understand that you'll likely be revising 2023 as we get closer to that, to ensure that it is collectors.
Yeah, so, we're looking at collectors, but, going back to Councilmember Hawkes's comments about the water lines, we're often alternating years where we do streets that don't need water line work, so the water fund can catch up. So the following year, we can do a water line project, or a street that needs a water line project. That way, we're alternating back and forth so those funds can rebuild themselves. And, sometimes you see some deviation from the list, because, we are trying to find, streets that have newer water lines in them that still need, meet those OCI requirements.
Understood. My one other question was just, would it be possible to go through the 2021 major goals and accomplishments and just let us know kind of the ETA on when you expect construction to be complete, when you expect work to begin on Evelyn Drive, what the timeline is for, the design, and then when will they actually be bid out, just so that we have a sense of what the rest of this year looks like?
Sure, absolutely. Orchard Avenue is actually scheduled to be completed at the beginning of September. Sadly, because of other legal issues, it may be delayed even further. We are having some irrigation line issues that we are having to address, as well as county jurisdiction issues on North Orchard. But the intent is to be done by September, of course, with the caveat of availability of asphalt. That's why I brought it to your attention. Like I said, 10th Street is in construction, nearly complete, so I would say it's probably going to be done by the end of August. 11th Street is complete. Evelyn Drive, it depends. If we can get 11th Street buttoned up, I would say that we're probably going to go to construction probably in September. Harding and the rest of the one block streets will probably be bid in September.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I guess my last question, if Mayor Pro Tem will allow, is just, it looks like there's quite a few additional projects that you're foreseeing in 2022, and you had mentioned that there, in order to ensure proper oversight, that you were needing to space out the projects a bit in 2021. Do you envision being able to undertake and successfully oversee all of the projects listed in 2022?
And that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. We have actually consulted with our consultant about possibly picking up a little bit of slack where they can in regards to inspection next year, so that we can free up our staff to do some of the back-end paperwork that goes along with construction management, as well as the fact that we are also looking to hire another person for the engineering department, and that we're not quite sure what that looks like yet. We're still working on the job description, whether or not that person would be more of an engineer or a construction manager that can put their hands in there and work out some stuff in the field. So those are a couple of strategies that we have to kind of relieve some of the tension in the staff.
Thank you.
And I'll follow up on that a little bit myself. But Kim, and we're having a discussion here. And so, one of the issues of having, if you've got a contractor and you need inspections done, which is basically QA, QC, quality analysis, quality control, where you're looking at the quality of a construction job to make sure it meets specifications and that the design is met and all those kinds of things. The issue can come in as if you have the one doing the work, doing the inspection. And in the past, the council's concerns on that have been alleviated by using city staff. But alternately, the other option there is a third-party independent contractor who there's a lot of those out there that do exactly those QA, QC functions. And so hopefully that's what you're looking at.
Yes, in fact, so what is happening is currently we have two consultants. We consult with Vivid Engineering, they're a geotech firm, and they subcontract to Wilson and Company, who actually does the design. Vivid does the geotechnical and the possible construction oversight. They don't currently do construction oversight for us, that is our staff, but they do have the ability to do so. So they are the third-party construction inspection that we're looking at. And also with Wilson and Company, what they do is the QA side of things. They make sure that, our cut sheets are correct and that our specs are correct, and they're the ones that do the QA on the contractor. And then, of course, Vivid does the QC, the actual on-site, boots-on-the-ground type of thing. And then, of course, we have our folks that do some field work. I mean, they do some QA, QC in the field. I think I've spent the past 3 weeks doing QA, QC with my guys. So, yeah, we do it too.
Okay, and a further question, in terms of deliverables for the street projects, I believe one of the deliverables is the as-built drawings. And have you seen those as a result of any of the projects that we've done so far? And I have a further question on that. Are they being signed off by a professional engineer somewhere?
Yes, they are. They have to be signed off by and stamped and sealed by a professional engineer. I have not seen any as of yet because we haven't completed anything yet.
Yeah.
I have seen some as-built drawings when it comes to development, but not from our personal construction projects, not yet as well.
Great. Okay. One other thing did you have something? One other thing that I'd like to bring up is that we do have an audit every year of the 2A funds, and the purpose of that audit is to ensure that our little bank account for 2A is not used for water line repair or replacement or any of those other things, or used to repair streets rather than reconstruct streets. Because the 2A language was clear on the ballot that the 2A money was only to be used for reconstruction. Repair is a lesser standard, like an overlay or something like that, chip seal. And so that's the purpose of the audit, and the audit that we just recently received did confirm that the 2A money was only being spent for reconstruction, which was the intent to begin with.
I
Yes, sir.
appreciate that, thank you.
So most of my questions have been answered in one way or the other. My biggest concern is just, I get a lot of questions from residents and on how we vet these. And while we understand that up here, I don't know if there's something we can do with maybe Christy Gotham on an educational way of how those things are vetted, just so that we can kind of get it out to the public. Because as I look at these streets that are on this list, I don't see any of them echoing Councilmember Hawkes' comments that are, in my mind, that people are wanting to see done. And I feel like that's a huge problem when we come to asking to, on a ballot again, to reinstate this. And I'm just wondering if there's something we can do on an educational standpoint to kind of explain to taxpayers how we vet these. Like I said, because we can ask the questions and we can understand it up here on the dais, but when we're asking taxpayers to go back to the voting booth, and I'm constantly telling them, just be patient, we're gonna get to your street. But then I look at the list and I don't see any of those streets on there. How I continue to tell them to be patient, because it's a tough sell for me, to, when I have somebody super upset about their street crumbling, how I tell them to be patient longer.
And unfortunately, as Kim said earlier, the fact is that we just have so many streets that are crumbling.
Right.
And, it's a community-wide issue. We're focusing on those arterials. Orchard was one that we heard quite a bit. That one needs to be repaired. When we met earlier this year for the council retreat, I believe it was Councilman Hawkes that mentioned Reynolds as one of those streets that needed to be repaired because he gets complaints about it. And that's, when the ARPA funds became available, because the bottleneck for that particular street was the water line underneath. We don't want to build new streets and then have to tear them out to replace a water leak.
And that's been kind of my save-all when I talk to people. But when I look at 22 and I see Pear and Fields again, I can tell you that I am going to have 10 people at my throat on why we're back to Fields again. Because we just did the stretch in front of Harrison, and we have so much on the east side of town that needs done. I can already name 10 residents that are going to be quite upset that we're back to Fields and Pear area again. And I realize that with the school right there, there's a ton of traffic. I understand that. And I understand the water projects that have to be done. I'm wondering if there's an educational way or something that we can put out to grab attention of people so that they are once again being patient and once again voting to reinstate this.
Yeah, we can put something out. We'll work on something. We do our quarterly newsletter that goes into the shopper. Maybe this is a good topic for the next one that we do.
Thank you.
Along those lines, you might turn the question around a little bit, but justifying why we're doing a particular street, there's a little bit of magic involved in that. But it might be better to say, okay, here's the streets we're not doing, and here's the reason why we're not doing them. That may help, because if there's some way to get a metric on that or something that will help explain, because you got both sides. People will say, well, you're doing that one, and you may have entirely fine and sufficient reasons for doing a particular street, but it's always a question, well, how come you're not doing my street? And there are probably good and sufficient reasons why those are not being done too. So maybe there's something that could be done there to help explain.
Right, and for instance, just to give you an idea of where I'm sitting, Franklin to Park Lane seems to be, because Park Lane is so bubbled up, there's a ton of stormwater issues there, because that whole street on Franklin to 15th to Park Lane, it just floods every time. So all those people on Franklin and Park Lane are tired of driving through the Mississippi River to get back to home. So those are kind of the portions. And I see Franklin on here, so
Yeah.
that's good.
Yep.
If I could address that a little bit, I am very sensitive to what you're talking about. I don't know if you know, I'm a board member in Pueblo West, so we, of course, have a lot of street issues there too. So I'm very, sensitive to that, and, having, residents come to you, talking to you about roads, talking to you about stormwater, how it affects roads, et cetera. I too would like to bring up a little bit of a point, is that people are looking at streets, okay? They're looking at Orchard, that's one street. They're looking at Reynolds, that's one street. But you have to take into consideration, those are really, really long streets. Right. And repaving and reconstructing a street is expensive. So when we're talking about education, we need to talk about what we call lane miles.
Right.
And when we're talking about lane miles, we're talking about a percentage. So when this started, 60% of Canyon City's roads were failed. I did a very quick and dirty calculation the other day because I was being interviewed about it. And I took what we had repaired compared to what we still had in failed streets. We had improved 20%. So our roads that are failing now have gone from 60% to approximately 40%. Now, that was just me being the engineer, being a little bit nerdy, trying to, figure out a number so that I could be interviewed. But come to find out, when I did the OCI calculation, and I looked at it, yesterday, the OCI bore that out, that we only have about 40%. Now, that 40% looks like a small number, but we're talking about lane miles again, where we're talking about, a full length of a street that may be a little bit smaller. It may be half the size of Reynolds. So we may be able to get those out a little bit more quickly in the future. These are long, long roads, and that's what an arterial is about, is that length of road, so they can get you from one end of town to the other. These other more neighborhood, or what we call, urban local roads, those are much shorter, and we can do a lot more because it's about the lane miles. It's not about necessarily one road.
Right, and I understand that. It's just, when you're talking to people that don't understand arterial versus residential, or however you want to phrase it, that's just the point that I was trying to make. But I do agree, Reynolds, and I wanted to say it for the record, 2A is designed to handle the budget on things that we as the city can't afford. So the smaller streets are coming. It's just more about, we can budget those, where Reynolds is such a long street. That's what 2A is designed for. So, thank you.
And one final thought is, when we look at stuff what we're doing, when you folks look at stuff when we're doing, one of the other things that, especially with my wife, notices that we'll go somewhere and there's one block that's completely resurfaced. And they're saying, why did we do just one block? That was one of Jim Meisner's biggest complaint when they were doing Meadows, and I don't know whether or not it's possible to say, okay, we think the one block needs it, but would we be better off ignoring the one block this time and adding that money and material to another street that's on the main areas, so we can get that road a little bit farther, I know I don't want to take anything away from anybody, but I'm looking at this. One block is one block, but if we can put that one block into, say, a street that is 6 blocks, well, now we can make it 7 blocks. And to me, that's a lot, in a sense, a little bit more beneficial. But that's that's just how people look at it. Like I say, especially my wife, if she goes, she said, "Why did they stop here?"
And that was part of the reason why we decided, to make Pear, that whole thing, was because, we can kind of get some scope, and get some savings from that. And that was our thought as well, because there's actually a piece of Pear between the Reynolds project and between the Grady 19th project that was completely missing. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would we gap that? It doesn't make any sense to me. So we just went ahead and said from Reynolds to 19th.
And one thing I'll call on you in just a second, but a metric that would be useful to us, and maybe by year at some point, is showing the lane miles that we've done by year. As I understood it, there's like about 100 lane miles of road. I believe the actual number is 108, if I remember correctly.
That sounds about right, yeah.
And to be able to have that metric to show citizens, okay, we started off with 60 miles that were failed, and now we've done X miles or whatever it is, this many miles that year, this many miles that year, with the addition of, the concerns about paying for water line underneath it as we go without 2A funds, and that kind of thing would be useful, I think. Amy?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just one additional question for me, and the map is very small, so I may not be reading it correctly. But I was curious about the last street on 2022 Franklin Avenue from 19th to Orchard. It doesn't look like it's a local road with an estimated OCI of 0 on the map, so I was just wanted to get a little bit more clarification on that. And feel free to tell me that I'm just reading the map wrong.
I don't know, I can't read it very well. I would have to get back to you on that, Member Smisher, so.
Just one final thing is, I just wanted to remind anybody that's watching that we do have See-Click-Fix for potholes, and that works pretty great unless it's a portion of road that is CDOT controlled. We can't, right, we can't.
Correct.
We can't repair those. So here's my next question, and this is just kind of out in the universe. If it's not exactly a pothole, but it's something where a patch has been fixed and sunk, is there anything that can be done to repair those sunken patchworks?
Yeah, we should be notified of those because whoever did the work, it may still be within warranty or any number of other things, but yes.
And I just noticed that because of all the rain we've been getting, you kind of can see all the imperfections and all these sunken patchwork places. And I didn't know if that fell under the realm of See-Click-Fix or if that's something that we report differently.
Yeah, absolutely. If the citizens are seeing that, they can call it in or put it on See-Click-Fix. You please let us know. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
And before you go to any other questions, there was Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick about Centerline Miles. We do have a project website as well as a project page on Facebook where the projects that are done each year and Centerline Miles by year is broken out on each of those project sites. And we can put something together when we do the informational in the packet or in the quarterly newsletter about that as well.
And maybe a suggestion, maybe something in our budget materials would be good
Sure.
to see those numbers there too. Any other questions, comments?
I just want to make one comment. And I want to thank Mr. Stevens for setting this up when I requested to have us there. I want to thank you for coming up, answer some questions that we each and everyone had. I hope some of the folks that were watching got some answers in that, but hopefully maybe now we can go to those folks, like I say, and give them some kind of a idea of what's going on and everything else. And thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I would say dittos to that. And if there's no other questions, we're adjourned.